This is January 17th in the year of our Lord 2009. This is Bud Perkins, Chris Christopherson, and Dr. Joseph P. Garland, and we're in Matewan at the Depot replica. And I'd like to talk to these two beautiful girls from over McAndrew, Kentucky, about Sid Hatfield and the Matewan Massacre on May 19th, 1920, right out here on the back of these buildings. Well, it was a bad time because coal kept dropping and dropping, and these young Irish immigrants and miners in here who couldn't hardly read or write their names on a 4-foot block wall out there, but they had voted in the Union about a week ahead over here in the Missionary Baptist Church over here on the riverbank, which is since gone because of the big floods. But then when the coal company, Stony Mountain Coal Company, right over here up this holler, behind 49 here, decided they was going to evict a bunch of miners. Well, they sent the Baldwin Phelps detective agents down here, thugs we call them, and they come into setting people out of their houses up here at Stony Mountain Camp, which was not in the city limits. Then they proceeded on down the railroad tracks to come into Matewan town here and evict our poor coal miners, in which Sid Hatfield, Ed Chambers, and Mayor Cab Testerman said, "Now boys, you don't have no right to set them off in here because this is a political subdivision here called Matewan. Now if you want to go to the federal judge in Charleston and get papers signed to evict them, then you come back down here and we'll protect you until then. Get your ASS, that's as in Jack, out of this town because you're not going to set these miners out down here." For which the Baldwin Phelps thugs said, "Now Sid, we'll pay you a little under the table if you'll go along with this." And he said, "Now boys, get out of town because we're not going to hear to it." Mayor Cab Testament said, "Sid, is this all worth it all?" He said, "Yeah, it is. Always when something's right, stand for it. If it's wrong, don't stand for it."
Sure.
Now today, if you've got a house, Miss So-and-so, I don't know your name, but if you've got a house and you rent it out to somebody, and just because they haven't paid any rent for 3 months and they're on some sort of a check, you still got to evict them legally. So they had to evict these people legally, not just because they were coal miners sitting in coal camp houses. We know they were on with the coal company, but they still had to go through a process legally to get them out. And they didn't want to do that. They wanted to go around the corner and pull their power and set these poor people out. Well, Sid Hatfield, we call him Two-Gun Smiling Sid, and Ed Chambers, one of the prominent people of this town, his family helped start this bank over here, now BB&T, owned the biggest house in town, which the guy you're talking to now owns. Well, they set them out, and they caused a ruckus here, and so the next day, Sid Hatfield, Cab Testerman, met them out here on the corner of the tracks that's right in front of the post office, said, "You have no right to do this." And the mayor said, "These papers aren't worth the paper they're written on," and he threw them down at their feet. Somebody come running around the corner to try to give them a message, and all of a sudden gun battle broke out. Now some say that Sid Hatfield, who was a real womanizer, shot the mayor in the back, but that's not true. He was shot in the stomach, and he fell down and suffered there. And several people were killed, in which there were 7 miners fell out the windows dead. Remember, all they had was a few old muskets. They didn't have any BAR and automatic machine guns. They just had some things to defend themselves from the Civil War. But there were three of the Baldwin Phelps, 3 miners, and the rest were Baldwin Phelps agents, and the mayor died. Well, they drug them over here on the porch of the Matewan House Bed and Breakfast down the road down here, and they died. Then they took them on down to the doctor's office of the little clinic that they had. But one of them run up under the house of Miss McCoy, Ma McCoy's house, and tried to hide. Well, they found him. Somebody seen him go in there and trying to hide, and they drug him out. And Miss McCoy was giving him protection because he come into her property, just like Old Testament prophecy, you know. If you come on somebody's property, you got to take care of them, okay? So they said to Miss McCoy, Miss McCoy said, "What are you going to do to this man?" He said, "We're going to kill him." Miss McCoy had a big big number 10 skillet and said, "No, you're not while he's in my property, and get out of here." She got him on the train and got him out of here, okay? So there was good and bad in this thing altogether, all right? Well, that was the end of the battle here, but the skirmish went on because these 19 miners were indicted here in Bloody Mingo and taken down to the courthouse down here, and they were sworn in the night before down here in the old Ed Chambers home as deputies, and that's the only thing that saved them. So the court down here dismisses the charges on them, and a few months later, federal judge in McDowell County at Welch, West Virginia, sent papers down here to have Ed Chambers and Sid Hatfield, Two Gun Smiling Sid, arrested, and they were shackled and handcuffed and taken to McDowell County. They got off, they got out of the vehicles they had them in, and they started up the steps, and lo and behold, a big conspiracy had conspired to kill them. And that was a guy by the name of C.E. Lively, who was a merchant here in town, who was earlier found out and was run across the Tug River to save his life, keep him from being murdered. And he's come around and ended up in St. Albans. He connected up with the Baldwin Phelps brother that was killed out here, and they formed a conspiracy to kill him, in which C.E. Lively's ancestor still has the gun that killed Sid Hatfield and Ed Chambers. Well, that would have been the end of it. But lo and behold, these young miners down through here, who was just simply trying to have their rights protected by forming the United Mine Workers of America, they began to riot. And they was burning everything to do with coal from Virginia County line all the way to Charleston, West Virginia, our state capital. Well, our federal president, these United States, sending 30,000 well-armed troops to the biggest mountain between here and Charleston called Blair Mountain. That's called the Blair Mountain Incident. Well, these bunch of miners around here started marching that way, and used to, when Mingo County was a part of Logan County, the sheriff over there still loved and had family over in these parts, so he rounded up 3,000 miners and 7,000 from over here. Let's see, I believe in Matewan I learned that was 10,000. And they distinguished themselves by putting a red bandana around their neck, and were known as the Rednecks. And they went up on Blair Mountain and stood their ground against federal troops. Now, the only time in American history where Americans have fought Americans was in a civil war until the incident at Blair Mountain. And here was federal troops with 30,000 troops and guns against a bunch of miners, and some of them had wore the same uniform, the First World War, so they didn't want to shoot them guys. And so the government sent a brigade of bi-wing planes and dropped handheld percussion bombs on these young rednecks and killed off a bunch. And then they released those Gatling guns, and killed a bunch more. And so the miners laid down their arms. Well, they lost that battle. But they won the war because a young organizer, well, really an older organizer, a lady girls from over here at Paint Creek, where Jerry West was a famous basketball player, came from. She came over here preaching unionism, and she brought a young guy with her by the name of John L. Lewis, who became the famous president of the United Mine Workers of America. And they organized everything from Virginia to Charleston, every camp and every holler and every town. If it weren't for John L. Lewis and this organization, these miners, we wouldn't have the Appalachian Regional Hospitals or the miners' hospitals in these counties, from Middlesboro, Kentucky at Bell County, all the way to South Williamson over here in Beckley, where these mining families go in there and get some decent health care. So this was all about doing what was right and trying to be pushed back down into giving our land away. You know, in 1901 and earlier than that, in the 1800s, these young flashy lawyers with these big land baron companies came over here and stole, like from my family, 1,666 acres for a shotgun. Because Paul Garland couldn't read or write, and they said, you can live here and bury your dead here and hunt and trap and fish here and do all that, and yet he lost everything. All the coal, all the oil, all the gas, all the timber, in perpetuity forever. Okay. okay? So all the land that you walked around here and you're over all of West Virginia, all of eastern Kentucky, all of western Virginia, all of eastern Tennessee, and all of northern Alabama was gone in a flash. So they've been robbed and raped and cheated out of their land, and then they voted a union in, and they were killed out here standing up for what was right. Now there's a lot of history in West Virginia as far as this old hillbilly is concerned. The real history of West Virginia and the unionization of America happened because somebody decided to stand up for what was right. Now that's my story, Dr. Garland, and I'm sticking to it. There you are.